compared to the leadership between Lian Zhan and Chen Shui-bian, I think in general, Lian Zhan, because he has a PhD degree in political science, so he has more knowledge about international relations. He understands the situations much better compared to Chen Shui-bian in terms of cross-strait relations and also international relations, diplomacy, because he was a foreign minister before. And also, in terms of vision, I think if you compare the policy papers presented by Lian Zhan, I think he has a better vision for this country. And he has more experience in government. He was as I mentioned, he was the foreign minister before. He was premier, he was vice president before, so he had a long service career background in the government, so he knows much better about this country. Chen Shui-bian is a lawyer, so he is very good at handling the law. He understands better about the legal system. But he came from a poor family, so he works very hard. And because he came from a poor family, so he had a very good connection with the grassroots people. He speaks the language of those grassroots people. So basically, I think Lian Zhan is more experienced in the government, has more knowledge, has more visions. But compared to Chen Shui-bian, I think he's not working so hard as Chen Shui-bian, especially in the election campaign period. And both of them have a very different family background. So to some degree, Lian Zhan give people an impression that he's not very easy to get closer to him. But Chen Shui-bian, because he came from a poor family background, so for the average people, they know that he's easy to access, to get closer to him. So that's basically the difference between the two in terms of leadership. Well, I had some experience with both of the two leaders. For example, once I took a group of foreign guests to visit President Chen Shui-bian in the presidential office. After the conversation with our foreign guest, so he took voters with each one of them. That's his style in the election campaign period, because he treats everyone as a person individually. So that could make the foreign guest, feel a lot more closer to him, and think he's easy to get close to him. Of course, I had many experience to get in touch with Lian Zhan, Chairman Lian Zhan of KMT. He can speak English very fluently in front of foreigners. Once I took our foreign guest to visit Lian Zhan, well, even though he asked me if he should speak Mandarin or English, at that time I'm not sure whether he is comfortable with speaking English directly or he needs translation. So I told him that you can speak English, but you can also speak Mandarin. If you need my translation, I would love to do that. But it turns out that he speaks English directly to the foreigners, and he speaks much better, very well, without any problem in expressing himself. So he is more international oriented. You know, when he speaks in English, he's also feeling very comfortable. And when he talks about international relations, when he talks about cross-trace relations, it's just like a teaching. He's like a professor teaching a group of students, you know, speaking a language very fluently and analysis very convincing. So that's his advantage. But the difference between the two is that after the meeting is over, Lian Zhan probably will never ask the guest to take photo one by one with him. You know, that's not his style. Well, that's something I noticed the difference between the two. Okay, the legislature passed the referendum law, and in that referendum law, there is so-called defensive referendum clause, and that defensive referendum can only be held by the president. But originally, the law passed by the legislature didn't mean that the president can hold the defensive referendum at the same time when the presidential election is held. So according to the law, president holding the defensive referendum along with the presidential election is controversial, and by some people would say it's illegal. And defensive referendum is being held under the condition that the country is being threatened by the enemies, especially national security is being threatened. But a lot of people would argue that at the time when we have the presidential election, we wouldn't say our national security is threatened by our enemies. The government and the president argue that our security is being threatened because China deployment about several hundred missiles aimed at Taiwan, and that's the threat of our national securities. But people would argue that the missile already there for many years. For many years, a lot of people wouldn't feel that our national security is threatened. So by holding that referendum itself is very controversial, and legally it's controversial too. Well, that's another issue. The legislature, which is controlled by the opposition party. Of course, the opposition party was very much opposed to the defensive referendum held by the president. But the problem is that the president just decided to go along. No matter how strong the opposition is, he didn't care. He just wanted to hold that referendum.
I thought the legislative yuan can block all the referendums. Were they not able to block that one?
No, because according to the law, the president can initiate the defensive referendum.
Oh, so the other referendums they can block, but not that.
Yeah,
that one.
yeah. Only the defensive referendum, the president can initiate that.
Okay, so what about the other referendum question?
The other referendum, it has to be reviewed by the legislature, but not this one, not the defensive referendum.
So how did the other one get through then?
Well, we haven't held any other referendum yet since the referendum law passed last year.
No, I meant there's two questions, right?
Yeah, two questions.
Are they both defensive referendums?
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
Okay, so it's under
yes,
the same
it's under the same
okay.
title,
Okay.
defensive referendum. The Central Election Commission was accused of being biased. For one reason is that the composition of the CEC is actually very much decided by the government, by the premier, by the president, because according to the CEC's regulation, that members of the Central Election Commission, are appointed by the premier. Since the premier has the power of appointment, so once the DPP became the government party, they appoint most of the members who are pro-green camp people to become the members. Well, there are about, I think it's about 15 members. Among those 15 members, about 11 of them are pro-green. Only 2 or 3 coming from the opposition party, and another one is so-called independents. So in terms of the membership of the CEC, it's very easy that most of the decisions made by the CEC are to the advantage of the DPP party. The other thing is that why people accuse of the CEC of being biased, because that most of the people, and also according to the media comments on the defensive referendum, many people tend to think that holding defensive referendum is not appropriate. For one thing, legally it's controversial. It's illegal. Secondly, holding referendum at the same time with the election could be a problem for the electoral process, such as counting ballots. For example, you have to. People are used to focus on election itself, but now you have 2 things going together, and most of the people who are involved in the electoral affairs are not used to that. So after election, you can see there's a lot of defaults of the election affairs, and holding referendum is one of the reasons. So the opposition party files the complaints to the CEC, but CEC just ignore of the opposition party's complaint and reject their suggestion that refuse to hold the referendum at the same times. So those 2 things are seen as biased from CEC. Yeah, after the election, the opposition party filed a suit against the CEC in a court. They think, also for the 319 gunshot incident. After the incident, the opposition party had already informed the CEC officials that their opinion is that since the president got shot and the situation was not clear, so the election should be delayed, postponed for a period of time until everything is cleared. Otherwise, we shouldn't have the election the other day. But the CEC, of course, rejected that suggestion. And from the opposition side's point of view, they think before the CEC made a decision, they actually had a consultation with the DPP leaders, and they decided to hold the election as scheduled, because that would be to the advantage of the DPP party. So that's also something complained by the opposition party and filed a lawsuit against the CEC. Not to mention there are so many voting irregularities during the process. From the blue side's opinions, this referendum should not be held at the same time with the presidential election. This is against the referendum law itself.
Okay.
And the other thing is, according to the defensive referendum law, the defensive referendum is being held under the condition that your national security is threatened by the external forces, right? But most of the people wouldn't think that our country is being threatened by external forces, and our national sovereignty is being harmed. The military has made this very clear that there is no national security mechanism existing in the Republic of China. So the term national security mechanism has never been there in the past. So someone created the term, and we don't know why. We don't know the meaning of the national security mechanism. So when the military leader, the Minister of National Defense, was questioned in the Legislative Yuan by MP, he answered that there is no national security mechanism. When the National Security Bureau chief was questioned in the Legislative Yuan, they answered that they have never heard about this term. You know.
They don't know the term, or nothing happened?
They don't know the term because the DPP government used this term to block the military personnel to go to vote. Well, the Secretary General of the presidential office, when President was shot and was hospitalized, he ordered a meeting. He summoned a meeting. The premier and some of the military leaders attended that meeting. So he issued an order from that meeting. The president can issue the order, right? But since the president was hospitalized, the Secretary General's order will be thought by the people who attend the meeting as president's order, right?
120,000?
Yeah, 100.
The military actually made a public statement?
Yeah, that's the from the military's leaders' statement, yeah. But the opposition party argued that they're at this over, 700,000. No. Yes, 700,000. 700,000 soldiers and the policemen were influenced by that order.
Influenced.
And could not go to vote. Yeah, but so we don't know. As you say, it's still controversial about the exact number of how many people were influenced. Basically, I think in general, most of the media, including TV station, newspaper, magazines, were pro-KMT in the past. For one thing, KMT was in power for many years, so KMT had a lot of influence on media. For the other thing is KMT, in terms of governing record, KMT was doing pretty good. So most of the media had very positive comments on KMT. But that situation changed when Li Denghui was in power. Well, especially in the later half of his presidential tenure. Because in the later half of his presidency, the KMT government was becoming more and more corrupted. So a lot of people in Taiwan had a very poor impression about Li Denghui's government. And media, of course, to some degree reflects the public opinion. So since the later half of President Li Denghui's year, some of the media changed their position, changed their impression about the KMT government. And you can read a lot of negative comments on former President Lee Teng-hui and his government. But since the year of 2000, since Chen Shui-bian and the DPP became the government party, well, when you are in the government, you have more resources. Then you have more ways to influence media. For example, you have more money. This is particularly clear in the 2004 presidential election period. We can see that the media has a lot of coverage about DPP's campaign activities, especially DPP's campaign rally. Because Chen Shui-bian, at the same time he's a candidate as well as president. So what he said, attract a lot of attention from the media. That's very natural because he's president. When president says, it means policy, right? So that grabs a lot of media's attention. But for the other thing is that they control the government. They are also very good at using the government resources, such as money, to influence media. For example, they use the government money to advertise, doing commercial on TV very often. And most of the TV commercials are very skillfully related to election campaign. And also during the campaign rallies, they are doing broadcasting live on TV. That costs a lot of money. But DPP is now in the government, so they have money. But you rarely see the opposition party's campaign rally activities live on TV because it's very simple. They don't have the money. So this is the reverse of the situation before the year of 2000. So basically, most of the people now in Taiwan got the impression that now today, I think most of the TV are influenced by DPP government. Well, commercial is very important for Taiwan's TV station because most of the money TV station earn are from commercials. And most of the the government's commercials constitutes, most of the commercials on TV stations. So if for one TV station, if you are the owner of the TV station, if the government decides to, withdraw all commercials from your TV station, it would be very difficult for you to survive without the government's commercials. So that's why the government can exert its influence on TV. When we look into the future of the Pan-Blue Camp, a lot of people talk about the possibility of merger between KMT and PFP. Basically, I don't foresee the possibility of merger between the two parties in the near future, because within the two parties, they have some internally. They have some forces, against this merger. Some people in the KMT, some people in the PFP, they disagree with the merger between the two parties. So I wouldn't say that they will merge with each other in the near future. Well, in that case, James Song of the PFP will continue to play his leadership role in the PFP, because currently we don't see any other person in the party who is possible to take over from James Song. But when you look at the KMT, the Kuomintang, it's very possible that KMT will have a leadership change in the future. In March, Lian Zhan has to decide whether he will step down from the chairmanship. His term will be ended in August. But if he decides to step down from chairmanship, then he will decide in March, because in March it's very possible that if Lian Zhan decides to step down, KMT will have an election for the new chairman in March. So before March, I think it will be becoming more clear that whether Lian Zhan will step down. But according to Lian Zhan's personal will, I think he is willing to step down. He is willing to hand over to the younger generation. But the problem is whether Wang Jinping or Ma Ying-jeou will take over the leadership. It's not clear yet. It depends on many factors. For example, if Wang Jinping, successful in his re-election of the speaker in the parliament, so he probably will be satisfied with his role as speaker in the parliament, and not really wants to take over the leadership role in the KMT, because the KMT now has a lot of problems, a financial problem, some other problems. So it's very, very possible that Ma Ying-jeou could take over the leadership role. Of course, this depends on the Ma Ying-jeou's personal decisions, whether he thinks it's worthwhile for him to take over the leadership at this moment, whether this is advantages to his future bid for the year of 2000 presidential election. So he has to do some analysis. But if you observe from the internal atmosphere within KMT, if Lian Zhan steps down, Ma Ying-jeou could be the very, very, very possibly he could take over the leadership role. So that's the internal situation in the Pan-Blue camp. Well, I think in terms of cross-strait relations, China does have its agenda. You mentioned 2006, 2008, because China thinks that in the year of 2006, according to President Chen Shui-bian's statement in the election campaign, in the year of 2006, he will launch the movement of constitutional amendment, or sometimes he said making a new constitution, which is very sensitive to China. When making a new constitution, a lot of things can be changed in the current constitution, including the name, the flag, the territory, the sovereignty of the Republic of China. If that happens, China will be intolerable in this situation. He probably will, take some actions against Taiwan. And the year of 2008, former President Li Denghui already mentioned that the year of 2008 is the time when the supporters of Taiwan independent movement is ready to make a move to establish a new Republic of Taiwan. So those are very sensitive time points for China to make a move. But the last year's December's legislative election was very important. I would say that was a turning point in terms of cross-strait relations. If in that election, if Pan-Green camp won the majority, for China's mentality, they would think that, well, this is it. Taiwan is going independent. There is no way can stop it, because Pan-Green wins the majority, and internally in Taiwan, there is no any other political forces can check and balance DPP's policy. DPP can do whatever they want to do. So it's up to China to take action, to do something to stop DPP's agenda. So then they would think that they are forced to do something, and very likely it's military action. But fortunately, last year's legislative election, the Pan-Blue camp won the majority. So if you read the newspaper or watch the TV station, the information were pretty much similar, that not only China but also U.S. feel released because Chen Shui-bian didn't get a majority. That means his policy agenda will be either stopped or postponed to a certain period of time. Well, that's what I said, that in terms of cross-strait relations, last year's December election was very important. But for China, I think they would think Pan-Blue camp is the so-called moderate in terms of manner of affairs policy. The DPP government is more radical. So their policy, of course, is try to get in touch with the Pan-Blue camp and try to stop the radicals' policy agenda, that is Taiwan independence policy agenda. But that situation makes the Pan-Blue camp in Taiwan very imbalanced. They are put in a very difficult situation because internally, anyone who opposed China strongly could get more support from the people in Taiwan, especially the peoples in the south. And that's the DPP's strategy. So if Pan-Blue camp's policy is seen as too close to China in terms of election strategy, that might be not a good idea. So in the presidential election, Pan-Blue camp just tried to escape away from the debate with DPP in the area of cross-strait policy, which I think it's a mistake. I think Pan-Blue camp should involve itself in the debate with the DPP. I had the experience that when I talked to the Pan-Blue people who make the cross-strait relations policy, they had the idea that they are afraid of debating with DPP in the election campaign because they think it's a bad strategy. They think they are already in the upper hand according to the opinion poll. They are regularly ahead of DPP in the poll, about 5 to 10%. So they think they are winning. They don't have to debate with DPP in a sensitive manner of affairs policy. They only have to talk about economy. Then they can win the election. But the problem is the more you try to escape from the debate, the more DPP has the opportunity to put a label on the pan-blue camp. They can put a label on the blue camp and saying that you are betraying Taiwan, you don't love Taiwan, you are pro-China, you know. But since you don't debate with them, so people always listen to, you know, to the argument from the DPP side. They rarely hear the argument from the pan-blue camp, especially the people in the South. Their information to some degree was not very complete as the people in the North, because people in the North can get a lot of information from different sources. So especially people in the South got the impression that pan-blue camp is pro-China. They don't represent the interests of the Taiwanese people. They represent the interests of Chinese people, you know. So that's the mistake I think pan-blue camp made during the election campaign, especially in the South. For example, I'll give you one example. During the election campaign, the DPP told the people in the South and spread rumors that the pan-blue camp, you know, argue for the three links with China. You know, they push for the three links between Taiwan and China, especially the direct air links. And the DPP told the people in the South, once the three links was achieved, then a lot of agricultural products will be coming from China into Taiwan, and that will be very bad for the farmers in the South, because the agricultural products from China will be very cheap compared to the products here. So the farmer will be living in a very difficult situation. But since, you know, as I mentioned that since the pan-blue camp didn't involve itself in the debate with the DPP, so, you know, most of the information for the people in the South receive from the DPP government. That's why they support the DPP government. After the election, perhaps you'll remember that the former DPP chairman Xu Xinliang took a group of you know, leaders in the agricultural areas to visit China and to talk with the leaders in China. This has to do with the issue I mentioned before, the agricultural product from China. So they talk this issue with the Chinese leaders there. And after their visit, the Chinese leaders announced that well, once the air links is achieved, the Chinese government is willing to import a lot of agricultural products from Taiwan to help Taiwanese farmers. So it's a mutual beneficial to each other. You know, not only you can import agricultural product from China, but also China can also import a lot of agricultural product from Taiwan, whatever your price is. You know.
So that would actually help
the farmer.
Yes.
Yeah. When KMT was in the government, you know, in 1992-93, you know, both Taiwan and China had reached a consensus that was called 1992 consensus. The so-called 1992 consensus means that there is one China, but under separate interpretation. So that means for Taiwan, we can say one China is the Republic of China. But for China, they can say one China is the People's Republic of China. Okay, so in this case, we can put aside, you know, the debate of the so-called one China issue. We can, you know, on that foundation, we can strengthen our relationship by having more exchange with each other. This is again, mutual beneficial. But during the election campaign, Chen Shui-bian distorted the so-called 1992 consensus. He said 1992 consensus is KMT accepted China's one China policy, and accepting one China policy is the sell-out of Taiwan to China, which is a distortion, which is not true. But since the KMT did not get involved in the debate in the area of cross-strait relations, so people in the South didn't receive too much information about what is really the meaning of 1992 consensus. What is the so-called one China under separate interpretation, and whether this is good or bad for Taiwan? Well, that can be debate, right? Again, I think cross-strait relationship is still the main area in the presidential debate because Taiwan faces a lot of difficulties, diplomatic relations, economic development, national defense, and all these areas are related to cross-strait relations. So whoever can improve cross-strait relations and protect the interests of Taiwan at the same time will become president next time. And the other area of presidential debate is Taiwan's democracy. We have been transformed ourselves from an authoritarian system to a democratic system. Most of the people are proud of our democracy. But more and more in recent years, people have a question in doubt that whether our democracy is really moving forward, is really progressive, or actually we are moving backward. And a lot of people criticize the current government's policy for bringing Taiwan's democracy backward. That's why some people talk about the third wave democracy movement in Taiwan. Because in the third wave democracy movement, we have to improve Taiwan's democratic system. Our power, political power, government's power, concentrate on president himself too much. So, the president has too much power on his hand. But according to the Constitution, actually, president doesn't have so much power. For example, DPP originally is seen as a democratic party, but now within DPP, no one can criticize Chen Shui-bian. No one can argue with him. If you disagree with Chen Shui-bian, you probably will be facing another problem, such as Chen Fuxiong. You are more or less alienated from the party, from the leadership. So this is only one example. From the government party, DPP itself, we see the change from a democratic party change into a authoritarian party. One man says yes, everybody says yes. So as a whole, the Taiwan society, we talked about media a moment ago. If you talk to the people working in the media, they also feel a great pressure from the government, the influence from the government, the threatening from the government. This government also not only interfere with media, but also send the police to check the media. That didn't happen before, even when KMT was in power. So again, Taiwan's democracy, this is another improvement. Yeah, the second way democracy movement is under Li Denghui's period. You know, the first way is Jiang Jingguo. Okay, he transferred Taiwan's political system from an authoritarian system into a democratic system. The second way is launched by the Li Denghui. Well, Li Denghui set up a lot of democratic, institutions. For example, the president was elected directly by the people. The Taipei mayor and the Kaohsiung mayor were elected by people directly. In the past, they were appointed by the government leaders. He revised constitution, making the constitution more democratic. That's the second way. And this is the third way. The third way, we have to, bring our democracy back to normal. We have to, to establish a democratic culture within the man of the people. Well, I think personally, Li Denghui wants to change the system into the so-called presidential system. But remember, he was in the KMT. Even when he was the chairman of the KMT, still within the KMT, a lot of people didn't agree with him to change the system into a presidential system. So Li Denghui once held a so-called National Development Congress and working with DPP. And actually the two parties reached a consensus that our political system should move into a French dual executive system. So they actually sent some scholars to France to study the French dual executive system and bring back the proposals. And Li Denghui had 6 times constitutional amendment. Basically, it's following the model of dual executive system. But once Chen Shui-bian became the president, he forgot his promise during the campaign. He once promised that once he got elected, he will carry out the idea of dual executive system. But once he got elected, he said this is a presidential system. And that's why in the past 4 or 5 years, Chen Shui-bian government was a minority government. So you couldn't go anywhere. You have a political deadlock between the legislative and executive relations because you didn't have the majority support in the parliament. But according to the dual executive system, anyone who controls the majority party in the parliament should have the right to organize the government. Then, in that case, president doesn't have too much power. But now, president has all the power. Yeah, according to our constitution, the executive branch is responsible for the legislative branch. That is similar to the parliamentary system. Our system is not president responsible to the legislative branch. It's executive branch responsible to the legislative branch. And also according to our constitution, the premier is the head of the government. The president is the head of the state. So actually, premier has a lot of power according to constitution because he's the head of government.
And that's supposed to be appointed by the legislative branch?
No, premier is originally, premier is nominated by the president but approved by the legislative yuan. But Li Denghui, when he revised the constitution, he removed that approval power of legislative yuan. That's the problem of our current constitution. Remember, the French dual executive system, according to the French one, the prime minister is also nominated by the president without approval from the parliament. But it has become a constitutional, custom that president will nominate someone from the majority party to become the prime minister, because in that case, the prime minister's policy can be passed in the parliament. But in our case, since you are the minority government, premier doesn't have the majority support in the parliament, so actually the government can do nothing. Well, I think basically that's their election strategy. They use that excuse to appeal to the voters, which proves to some degree very effective. But basically, this is the problem of the system. Even now, the president is KMT, but the majority party is the DPP. The same situation will continue. And if that is the case, when DPP controls the majority in the parliament and president is from KMT, I think the DPP party will penalize the whole parliament. But compared to the previous parliament, when KMT was in power, when DPP was in opposition, and DPP was minority party in the parliament, actually, this parliament has passed more bills and laws compared to the previous parliament. So that's why some people also criticize the opposition party, the KMT, the PFP. They said they don't act that kind of opposition party. They are still like a government party because they had been in power for a long time. They used to be think themselves as a government party. So in the parliament, sometimes they even help the government to pass the bill, to pass the budget. This is particularly clear in the Foreign Affairs Committee. They think, Foreign Affairs Committee is controlled by the opposition party. They have more members. But the Foreign Ministry, every year, does not have too much difficulty in passing their budget in the parliament because the opposition party also support the budget proposed by the Foreign Ministry. So that's the example. If you compare the bills passed by the parliament, this parliament and last parliament, actually this parliament passed more bills. That's the pan-blue camp is more stupid. They don't have the ability to engage in the debate in the election campaign. That's why people got an image that, pan-blue camp is a destructive forces in the parliament. You have to engage yourself in debate to present more facts to the people, And I think they failed to do that. Well, the opposition party's position is that they don't block the national defense budget. They only question. The two questions is, one, whether the purchase of the weapon is too costly compared to the other nations, whether you buy the weapons with a much expensive price. The other one is whether we really need those weapons, or those weapons is the most modern one, or is the weapons the old one. We sometimes buy the old weapon that the U.S. retire those weapons and sell to us. That was the second-hand weapon, not the modern one. So that's the opposition party argues. They don't block the national defense budget. Actually, a lot of the members from the DPP, from the opposition party in the National Defense Committee have a very good relationship with the Ministry of National Defense. They had a good connection with each other.